Hey strangers, there's one thing we know for sure as business owners ourselves. The less your business spends, the more margin you keep. But today, everything costs more. So, smart businesses are graduating to NetSuite by Oracle. NetSuite is the #1 cloud financial system, bringing accounting, financial management, inventory, HR into one proven platform, helping you reduce IT costs, maintenance costs, and manual errors. Over 37,000 companies have already made the move to NetSuite. Backed by popular demand, NetSuite has extended its one-of-a-kind flexible financing program for a few more weeks. Head to netsuite.com/strange. netsuite.com/strange.
Hey, true crime fans! Tired of ads interrupting your gripping investigations? Good news. With Amazon Music, you have access to the largest catalog of ad-free top podcasts included with your Prime membership. After all, ads shouldn't be the scariest thing about true crime. To start listening, download the Amazon Music app for free or go to amazon.com/ad-free-true-crime. That's amazon.com/ad-free-true-crime to catch up on the latest episodes without the ads.
Hey there, strangers. Because the Chupacabra's very nature involves animal attacks, this tale may not be appropriate for all listeners. I'm Laurah Norton, and this is One Strange Thing, the show where we search the nation's news archives for stories that can't quite be explained. Strangers, we've been waiting to tell this tale for a while. After all, it's not often that one can pinpoint the beginning of a cultural phenomenon, at least one that didn't start on the trusty old World Wide Web. But we can thank a different world, that of comic radio DJs, actually, for introducing the general public to this particular concept, the now famous cryptid known as the Chupacabra. Now, we know that DJs are a strange introduction to, well, anything, but stay with us. We will get there. No doubt you are familiar with the Chupacabra now, as it does rank among the most famous of the cryptid beasties. And that is pretty impressive, as it is a relative newcomer to the fold. The Loch Ness Monster and Bigfoot staked out their claim a good deal earlier in the game. But when your name is Spanish for goat sucker, well, perhaps it was just destined to be. The thing about Chupacabra is that it is an active critter. There's no shy retreating into lakes or hiding behind trees in vast forests. Chupi was out there, stalking the livestock and blazing a trail across Puerto Rico, through Latin America and across the Southwest, and then the rest of the U.S. Heck, there are even reported sightings in the United Kingdom and Asia and beyond. Very illustrious, we must say. Mr. Worldwide indeed. You may know that the Chupacabra has been described in a variety of ways. Sometimes it's like a wolfy, dog-like thing, or a lizard, or even rarely a bird. But in most forms, whether canid or reptilian or even avian, it tends to have a few distinct features. As detailed by McGill University, quote, glowing eyes and bat-like wings and spikes on its back. Sometimes the wings are the spikes, very multi-purpose, and often the creature can walk on 2 legs. And, of course, it always has a nice set of fangs, because this cryptid, at its heart, is a sort of vampire. Maybe that's why it caught on so fast. After all, vampires were a pop culture phenomenon in the 1990s. There was Buffy, Interview with a Vampire, we could go on. And that is when Chupacabra made its major debut. We did say we'd get back to that, didn't we? So, back in 1995, a San Juan, Puerto Rico-based comedian, Silverio Perez, decided to discuss a rather pressing current event with his audience. Back then, the comedian also had a popular radio show, so his commentary, it reached a lot of people. According to the Naples Daily News, reports had been coming in from the town of Canovanas. There were attacks happening, people said. not against the humans, but their livestock. Perez described rather ghastly slaying of the cattle, and what was strange, he said, was not just that they were killed, it was that something had literally been draining the blood of all kinds of farm animals, cows, sheep, pets, and of course, goats. Frightening bite marks were left on their corpses, as if their blood had been sucked, and though popular legend holds that only bite marks were present, we did find contemporary reports that mentioned other wounds, such as disembowelment, very unpleasant stuff. Still though, the blood draining was the focus, and that's why, per the Center for Inquiry, Perez coined the name Chupacabra in late 1995. When he described the attacks to his audience, the name stuck. But it's not just that Perez tossed out a term, which he seemed to have found kind of amusing, and thus created a legend. It's about what people were experiencing in Puerto Rico back in 1995 that made it the perfect setting for a legend to spring up and take root. You see, the attacks had soon spread beyond Canovanas. Across Puerto Rico, farmers were finding animals scattered in the fields, with those apparent bite marks the most discussed wounds. And notably, there were also purported sightings of the actual hunter, and it wasn't anything they'd seen before. The people, they were frightened. This is not a joke, Canovanas Mayor Jose R. Soto told the Washington Post. A number of my constituents have lost animals in the past few months. We're taking it very seriously because it's killing animals right now, but people could be next. Now, strangers, we told you chupacabras have at various times been spotted in the world and described in different ways. And, as we said, there's a discrepancy in description. That seems to come down to both era and regional variation. Some are canid, some are reptilian, and some are kind of, well, both-ish. The creature reported in Puerto Rico in 1995 was of the lizard variety. This is markedly different from the canid type that first popped up in Mexico and the US. There you can imagine a kind of mutant vampire dog. Or maybe don't imagine that. We would not. Anyway, the Puerto Rican chupacabra seemed to be something like a lizard. That is, if a lizard was bipedal and smelled like sulfur, and as was reported in the Asbury Park Press, quote, could jump like a kangaroo and was 3 or 4 feet tall and had red eyes the size of hen's eggs, long fangs, and multicolored spikes running down its head and back. Other newspapers noted eyewitness accounts that included gray skin, almost like an alien, quote, powerful hind legs, and even quills that doubled as wings. So, with these flying lizards on steroids spotted in Puerto Rico, the people were understandably concerned. 1995 had already been a hard year. What you need to understand, strangers, is that it wasn't just about the livestock attacks. According to Skeptic magazine, quote, it began with a terrible drought. Puerto Rico hadn't been so dry in decades. Crops were failing, water was rationed, and in some areas, city water supplies were turned off entirely on every second day. People saved meager rainwater in barrels. Unfortunately, those water barrels bred mosquitoes. The blood-sucking insects then spread a disease called dengue fever. Many thousands fell sick, and some died. And all of that was before the mysterious animal attacks. According to the Asbury Park Press, when livestock were found, quote, across Puerto Rico with 2 small puncture wounds on their necks and drained of their blood, locals were not patient with the government. They'd been through enough already, and they wanted answers. After all, they weren't just finding dead livestock. They were hearing reports of strange creatures stalking their fields, creatures that no one had ever seen before. Skeptic magazine reported that some officials suggested that wild dogs were to blame, but many rejected that answer because of the rumors. After all, what dog could drain all of a creature's blood? It had to be something new, something unheard of. Or maybe it was something old. reappearing at a time of great suffering, as terrible things are apt to do. Some of the people of Puerto Rico were willing to believe that, because, you see, strangers, something like this, it had happened before. We found an archive of Puerto Rican newspapers that told the tale. The Biblioteca Virtual, which collects news clippings from across the territory, had evidence that in 1975, a creature known as the Mocha vampire had struck in very similar fashion. According to the local news clippings, a series of similar livestock attacks had occurred then in, of course, the town of Mocha. They were attributed to a creature that, quote, extracted all the blood from its victims and in turn left an opening in the body the size of a coin. In the case of the Mocha vampire, many witnesses claimed that they'd seen a large bird, a supernaturally large even, stalking animals from the skies or lurking on the rooftops of their homes. The beast was blamed for the deaths of scores of animals across the town. Apparently, some people thought the creature might even be an alien. You may not be surprised to discover that that theory was also bandied about when Chupacabra made its debut in 1995. Some UFO sightings did pop up in both years, as they're wont to do. The description of the vampire was never as colorful as Chupi. No quills that doubled as wings, or Bowser-like lizard things lurking with red eyes among the cattle, but the problem itself was very real. Farmers who feared for their animals, and the animals who died by the dozens. The thing is, though, that, at least according to the official record, there was an answer in that particular case. According to the Hispanic Journal, authorities claimed that there were strange animals afoot attacking the livestock, but they were not cryptids. Per the journal, someone had, quote, illegally introduced alligators into the delicate Puerto Rican ecosystem. The alligators mauled animals as they approached watering holes. Because alligators weren't native to the island, residents had never seen these types of maulings. Now, we don't know how that would possibly cause a coin-sized hole, as the word mauling generally implies a lot more going on, but that was the official take. Many people, they never believed that though, and so the legend stuck around. This episode is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Whether you love true crime or comedy, celebrity interviews or news, you call the shots on what's in your podcast queue. And guess what? Now you can call them on your auto insurance too with the Name Your Price tool from Progressive. It works just the way it sounds. You tell Progressive how much you want to pay for car insurance, and they'll show you coverage options that fit your budget. Get your quote today at Progressive.com to join the over 28 million drivers who trust Progressive. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Price and coverage match limited by state law.
Hey, Prime members! Are you tired of ads interfering with your favorite podcasts? Good news! With Amazon Music, you have access to the largest catalog of ad-free top podcasts included with your Prime membership. To start listening, download the Amazon Music app for free or go to amazon.com/ad-free podcasts. That's amazon.com/ad-free podcasts to catch up on the latest episodes without the ads.
Now, the descriptions of the 1995 Chupacabra, they aren't so different from an alligator, we suppose, if an alligator decided to develop bipedal status and some glowing eyes. And the 2 years that we're concerned with, 1995 and 1975, they did have something else in common. Per Skeptic magazine, both monster crazes and series of attacks took place during drought years. Per the NSIS, alligators, they do tend to wander during droughts, which might have explained at least a few attacks. If we're looking for stories that predate the 1995 appearance of Chupacabra that could have set the stage, well, there is one more on hand, and it has a linguistic connection that is pretty interesting. Strangers. There was another animal, though certainly a less dramatic one, who some claim has an association with our creepy cryptid. The Center for Inquiry, a blog published by author Benjamin Radford, he wrote The Book on Chupacabra, explains that there's a long folkloric tradition of blood-sucking creatures in the Americas and in Europe that might, when the livestock was found, have brought a certain monster to mind. Of course, European legend made its way here, and we do know how things grow and change. Radford cites the work of author Jason Calavito, who argues that the name Chupacabra actually, quote, derives from 2,300 years of European and American traditions about nocturnal creatures that prey on livestock, and it all started with a small, completely harmless little bird. The first Chupacabra was not a monster, nor was it a vampire. And that bird, strangers, was the nightjar. In Jason Calavito's own blog, he explains that, quote, the nightjar is native to Puerto Rico, and that he found printed references to the bird on the island as Chupacabra dating back to at least 1948, but certainly it had been so known much earlier. In fact, he wrote that, quote, the nightjar already had a sinister reputation before the Spanish conquest, at least in parts of South America. The nighttime cry of the bird was believed to be the shriek of evil spirits. He goes on to say that some have written that the nightjar was even known as, quote, the bird of death. According to Calavito, quote, originally, the goatsucker was so named not because the creature sucked blood like a vampire, but because it sucked milk directly from the teat. Now, Benjamin Radford, our Chupacabra expert, he pointed out that plenty of birds have legends and myths attached to them, especially the good and spooky ones like owls and crows. And while goatsucker is a pretty weird name, the nightjar, it was never actually accused of vampirism. It was just known for creating a really awkward situation for mother goats. It's more an air of evil spirits and menace versus a direct correlation. The modern Puerto Rican goatsucker doesn't seem, in Radford's estimation, to have been truly inspired by the little milk-sipping nightbird of yore. So maybe Perez, the comedian, had heard of that very old-fashioned colloquial term for the bird, but maybe he hadn't. Whatever the past associations were, the 1995 appearance of Chupacabra, it certainly caused waves across the country, and eventually the world, that a tiny bird never could have. According to the Washington Post, officials, quote, gave some credence to the Chupacabra's hysteria recently by launching an investigation of the night attacks. This was perhaps in concern about its impact on the tourist industry. Professional hunters, they were invited to lead large-scale hunts for this creature, or creatures as there were sometimes multiple sightings, and packs of armed police and citizens gathered to do organized searches. According to the Post, they even tried, quote, using a caged goat as bait. Yes, strangers, this is the third time that we've told you about a sacrificial goat used to draw out a cryptid. We are not sure what is wrong with people, but you will be glad to know that the tactic was, again, not a success. But officials did say that they'd at least attracted the attention of the Chupacabra, because when their hunts took place, the attacks stopped. So they figured the Chupacabra was changing up its hunting grounds. While all this was happening, the popular media did what it does. It created a sensation. And with that sensation came Chupacabra merchandise. We're talking t-shirts, hats, even themed sandwiches. We can't even begin to imagine what those tasted like. And apparently, according to the Post, quote, a new alcoholic beverage, which its inventors said was named after the Chupacabra because nobody knows what is in it. Meanwhile, though, officials, skeptics, and scientists, they were actually trying to pin down what was happening in Puerto Rico. According to the Post, they did actually consider the alligator solution from the 1970s, or other exotic pets or species that might have been introduced to the island, like a new kind of snake. A public information officer for the State Civil Defense Office even suggested that, quote, It's also possible that an animal escaped from one of 2 wildlife theme parks that used to operate here, including one on the Canovanas border. And there was even some talk that the tabloids created the story out of whole cloth. Consider this. As the Washington Post pointed out, animal maimings are pretty disgusting and pretty exciting news. And we do have to wonder, while there certainly could have been a few attacks, could some of the other deaths have been fairly attributed to those terrible droughts? That still leaves the matter, though, of the strange creature. Plenty of people claimed that they'd seen something across many towns and villages that looked nothing like an escaped snake. What on earth could they have experienced? A drought or a tabloid? They couldn't very well explain that away, could they? Perhaps it was truly, simply, the paranormal. Perhaps, except for one strange thing. Remember Benjamin Radford? He is that pesky, excellent researcher who wrote the seminal book on the Chupacabra phenomenon. And he thinks that he has some answers for us. According to the Christian Science Monitor, Radford went through every news report covering the Chupacabra's 1995 debut. And while at first it seemed that the descriptions were widespread, sightings popping up all over the place, he actually traced the first to a very vivid illustration based on a single witness named Madeline. It had run in a popular Puerto Rican newspaper. And when Radford saw that drawing, he was pretty surprised, because he recognized it. It looked just like the monster from the popular sci-fi movie, Species. And when did that movie come out? 1995. When he contacted Madeline for an interview, he asked her if she'd seen it. And, you guessed it, she'd watched Species, quote, in the weeks prior to making her description. Pretty interesting, right? But that isn't all. They never captured a single Chupacabra specimen on the island. And per Radford's book, necropsies never confirmed that blood was actually drained from those poor animal victims. So we can't say for sure how people knew that that was actually happening. And we still don't know to this day what exactly attacked the livestock. Now, when later Chupacabra stories spread across Mexico and the southwestern US, and eventually, well, the world, things got even weirder. Because the cryptid seemed to simply shapeshift. Suddenly, it became a dog or wolf-like beast, a hairless, frightening, spiky-backed thing that bore little resemblance to the lizard that had supposedly stalked Puerto Rico. Why these creatures were associated with the original Chupacabra at all may have had more to do with language and legend than form. You see dead livestock, and well, you look around for a strange creature to blame it on. And though a number of the alleged canid Chupacabra corpses have been recovered, they seem less paranormal and, more mundane. As Skeptic magazine pointed out, DNA testing has not been supportive of true Chupacabra believers. Mostly, authorities have discovered that those strange canid creatures seen on farms and creeping across the fields of the Southwest are coyotes with really, really bad cases of mange. There's not a vampiric fang or a spiky quill in sight unless the unfortunate fur patches count. Now, strangers, you know that we hate to spoil a good cryptid time, and we certainly don't think that these boring logical answers can explain away every bizarre attack that's been recorded across the world. But we want a little something more substantive, we guess, than a coyote with a hair problem or a Species fanfic to give us an explanation for the mystery. That said, it doesn't mean that we're going to stop buying Chupacabra merchandise. We do love a good t-shirt, or a sandwich, or a drink with ingredients that no one can guess. That was an inspired marketing gimmick. We hope you'll join us next time for another real-life story from the fine print of America's local papers, from the lives of regular people just like you and me, except for one strange thing. Strangers, I've released my first book, and it's available everywhere now as audiobook, hardcover, and ebook. I read the audio version myself. It's called Lay Them to Rest. It's about John and Jane Doe's, my years-long experience following forensic experts around the country, and our efforts to solve the mystery of a cold case. One Strange Thing is an independent podcast. To support the show and to hear more of the entirely true and enticingly peculiar, you now have 3 options to enjoy 2 extra bonus episodes a month. On Apple Premium and Supercast, you can get the bonus episodes delivered to your app of choice for just $2.99. And for $2 more a month on Patreon, you'll get more fun extras. There you'll find ad-free early releases of our regular episodes, 2 full-length bonus episodes, monthly giveaways, blog posts, and occasional live streams, all for $5 a month. We hope you'll check out one of these options to support the show. There's a link in our show notes. And if you enjoy One Strange Thing, please take a moment to leave us a great rating or review on your favorite podcast app. It really helps.